At the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that I'll also be tackling this topic as someone with a lived experience of losing someone to suicide. For me, I lost my brother Matt, which was the worst thing in the world that happened to me. So, one thing that frustrates me having lost someone to suicide is that the statistics that are associated with suicide and the numbers, while they are powerful, they don't really capture the experience and pain and agony of losing someone. Or in my case, when my brother went missing, I had no idea what had happened to him. And so, for my coming out proud story, I wrote this story for the Huffington Post Personal that documents the night that my brother went missing towards the night that we found him, or the day that he turned up, at least. Um, and so, what I hope to capture in this piece is that when somebody says that they lost someone to suicide, there's a whole story behind that sentence. Whenever we see that about 50,000 people die by suicide each year, each one of those numbers has its own story, and then multiply that by the number of people who are affected and survive that person who has lost that person. And every single person has probably a really stressful, complicated, difficult to decipher experience about um, living through that event. So for me, what I tried to document in my story was kind of the behind the scenes that went on. So I would say that most people are understanding that when they hear somebody has lost someone to suicide or a death of any kinds, that it's horrible, it's tragic, and whatever. But it doesn't stop there. There's the details of the story. The At least in my experience, in the 6 weeks that we were searching for Matt, there was the uncertainty, the chaos. It felt like a roller coaster of hell, is the best way I can explain it. So, in my experience, when my brother went missing, I never knew for sure if he had died. I didn't know if he had been captured. I didn't know if he was hiding or just taking a break or hibernating, um, which was a phrase that he had used before. We had no idea what had happened to him. So our days were just filled with searching the streets of Chicago, hanging flyers, talking to all of our friends and family, posting on Facebook, um, trying to weigh the pros and cons of whether we want the Chicago news to know about this event to help us. And so during these 6 weeks, it was filled with kind of this oscillation of hope and hopelessness, where we would maybe get some news of a possible sighting of him, or we would get some video camera footage, and I would go to check it out, and I would have some light in me that would be like, please let it be Matt. And then when it wasn't him, just the vast disappointment, and again, the uncertainty and the chaos. And it was really unclear when this would all stop or if it would even stop. I'm thankful that we even found him. And so in my story, I also share some experiences of while most people in my life were supportive, there was a good amount of people who I don't think recognized how their actions could be worsening the situation that me and my family was already going through. So, if you are interested in reading the story, check it out. I would say after the story, we still have some experiences related to stigma and how stigma can worsen our experience of dealing with Matt's death. So, some of my experiences with stigma are people feeling generally uncomfortable about talking about the topic of suicide, or when I say that, I've lost a brother, they'll, you know, a common question is how or what happened, and I'll say, he died by suicide, and I'll just know that instantly people don't really know how to react. And I don't know if that's the same experience for kind of more, um, I guess, acceptable deaths in society. So if somebody dies of a terminal illness or there's some sort of expectation, um, I don't think people always have an appropriate response in those situations either. I would just say, with my experience, and when I mention the word suicide, I almost can sense that their faces go flat and they don't really know what to do. That sucks. Um, when I've shared my experience about talking about suicide before, people have come up to me and asked me why I would want to share that experience given what happened. Um, this isn't them having bad intentions, but I think from their perspective, they're like, well, why do you want people knowing about this? Why do you want to be associated with this? And that's such a catch 22 because if we don't talk about suicide, how the hell are we going to do anything about it? Um, in one of the worst cases and more obvious cases of my experiences with stigma, and I was fortunate to know somebody who was willing to talk with me about this, is I was actually, to my what I found out, rejected from a research application when I disclosed in a personal statement why I was interested in researching depression, stigma, and suicide related stigma. And in the first paragraph of my essay, I had mentioned that I had lost my brother to suicide, and I was really interested in finding ways to get more people to talk about suicide for the exact same reasons that I'm pointing here. And ironically, that apparently was uh, not taken well by the everybody on that committee. So I share my experiences now, and I share all the research on this to come to the broad conclusion of let's stand up to the stigma related to suicide. Um, let's do what we can to kind of open up the conversation, because the less we talk about it, the worse things will be. So I want everybody to check out some of these resources that I'm providing. I'll send everybody the PowerPoint, or I'll have Lendy pass around this PowerPoint. These are resources where you get to know people's lived experience. You can read about people who have lost someone to suicide, or read about people who have survived a suicide attempt. Resources to learn more about suicide is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, NAMI, the Trevor Project. Check out those websites. And other resources if you want to learn more about it. There's this awesome workbook that came out by Dr. Catherine Gordon. It's a really accessible book for anybody who is struggling with suicidal thoughts or who knows somebody who might be, and how you can work through those. Why People Die by Suicide by Dr. Thomas Joyner, who's a leading expert in suicide research, is also a great read. Anyways, I want to thank everybody for listening and for bearing with this online presentation. If I were in person, I might have done things a little bit differently. I would have maybe want to hear from other people's experiences. But thank you nonetheless for listening, and take care.